doing where we have to mourn sisters because of men. I'm tired, just so is every other woman in this space. So we tend to be confused about what rape is because, oh, but maybe I wasn't raped because my legs weren't open in the air, I wasn't on the floor, or it wasn't as violent as people think it is. It was rape. You were abused, and we believe you. Whatever it is that you went through, it is valid.
Do you really think you're going to solve the so-called gender-based violence in South Africa, or GBV, by running around and calling our young men and little boys all sorts of names, potential sexual assaulters, and saying that the problem is how we raise our men and teaching men not to abuse women? You really think that's going to work? You really think that's the problem? I've never met a man who has ever been told not to assault a woman or not to commit sexual offenses. That's never been a thing. No one has ever had to sit down and tell a little boy, don't rape. That's not real. And people that go around acting like that's an approach that's going to work are not only delusional, but these are very foolish people. And the approach that we're taking in South Africa, and this is the approach we're taking in South Africa, calling our young men and boys potential sexual assaulters, that is evil. And here's the thing, it will not stop the scourge of assaults and abuse on women. Now put aside that GBV, gender-based violence as I like to say, actually excludes boys, actually excludes men who are the highest victims of murder and crime and assault actually in this country. It's just that men don't talk as much about it as women do. Of course, men are ignored as usual, and at the center of the whole thing is women again. Alright, so let's grant that. You think you're going to fix it by running around having marches, forming little organizations that speak out and insult young men and boys, and then on top of that calling all men trash? You're delusional. Because first of all, very few men ever commit a crime like that, and very few men ever even think about committing a crime like that. And you have to ask yourself, is this approach working? Obviously it's not. All you do is take promises from politicians like the president, and he promises he'll do this and do that, and he sympathizes with you, and he comes out there and puts on his best sad face to say that no one should be hurting women while women are being hurt every single day in this country. And I tell you this, no man in their right mind wants to live in a country where women are assaulted and hurt at the rate of this country, which is unfortunately known as the rape capital of the world. However, the approach that feminist groups, women in general, and other stupid people who align with them, like male feminists, the most disgusting creatures on earth, these sort of groupings that align with this sort of approach that's been taking place in South Africa to try and deal with this are completely wrong, and it won't work.
We are the women in this space. So we tend to be confused about what rape is because, oh, but maybe I wasn't raped because my legs weren't open in the air, I wasn't on the floor, or it wasn't as violent as people think it is. It was rape. You were abused, and we believe you. Whatever it is that you went through, it is valid.
What have we done?
I think it's about time that South Africa launches a gender-based violence unit.
Yeah.
Outside of the police, we need to have a force, we need to have a unit that tackles gender-based violence every single day, 24/7.
So you go around insulting men, insulting our young men, calling our little boys potential rapists, and then you turn around and you say, well, the men must fix it.
Okay.
Obviously, we need to find a solution to this, and we must do that promptly. However, the solution that you have taken on of these professional shouters and professional grievance mongers is not going to help you. Are they dealing with trauma? Are they dealing with very hurtful and very terrible crimes that were permitted against people they know, people they work with, and perhaps themselves as well? Probably. Yet the approach you're taking still won't help, because you think someone who goes around assaulting women, raping women, and murdering them and putting them in suitcases, you think that person cares what you say on the news with emotion and grief? You think that's going to change that person's mind which is a very small percentage of very few people in this country, you need to wake up and get wise. The people that are dealing with this so-called GBV, of course excludes men and boys, need to wake up and get wise, because it also excludes children actually. At the center of this is women, again, obviously. We now have a course on Teachable. It's for boys between the ages of 10 and 18, about 12 men from the Bible, where we teach about manhood, masculinity, and becoming a man. Check it out. You're not going to fix it, obviously. You're not going to fix it in a country where most of the boys are raised by single mothers. So you don't even ask that question, first of all. Why in a country where most of the children are raised by single mothers do we see such high rates of assault on women? Don't you think people raised by single mothers would be the most respectful to women?
Whaley has landed several of those inside low kicks.
Don't you even ask yourself that question? If most of the boys and most of the people in prison for sexual offenses actually, and for any offense, if most of those people in prison for sexual offenses or not are raised by single mothers, why don't the women groups ask themselves why? Why is their approach, teach men not to rape? That is the dumbest slogan I've ever heard, and I've never met a man who's ever had to be taught to not rape. That is not only insulting and offensive, it is dismissive of men, and it is abandoning all common sense by the people that utter it. Who on earth needs to be taught that? You're an idiot if you think that. And if you say that, you're even a bigger idiot. So if all these people are being raised by single mothers are the ones abusing them and raping them and murdering them, why don't these women's groups and women in South Africa ask themselves that question? That is an uncomfortable question that they will not address, because these people do not think straight and are not about fixing this problem. This problem can be fixed very clearly and very simply with harsh sentences, with a move away from the current climate of a hyper-feminized culture where every school teacher is a woman, where we put women right at the center of everything, and we obviously need to get rid of social grants so that we don't have so many single mothers. And feminism, of course, is a disease that breaks societies and creates the sort of people you see that go around hurting women, ironically. Your approach is not working. It's not ever going to work because it is the wrong approach aimed at the wrong people and at the wrong point of what the problem is. Add to that, now there's been a new court case brought forth by an organization called the Embrace Project.
And thank you so much for having me here. This is really a momentous occasion for our organization, which brought this application. So the context behind the application is we as the Embrace Project actually discovered through the second applicant, who is a rape survivor, who reached out to us after we conducted a educational series on consent. She was the first person to point to us that there were these major flaws in the sexual offences legislation. She, in fact, opened our eyes to the fact that you could prove beyond a reasonable doubt as the prosecution that there was a lack of consent when committing some particular sexual act or sexual offence, but that the court could still acquit an accused person based on an inability to prove criminal intent.
A woman was speaking for them named Leanne Germanos Manuel. She seems nice enough, but of course she had the feminist crazy eyes. And what they are looking at and have done through the Pretoria High Court is changing some of the legislation around sexual assault. They've convinced the High Court of Pretoria that some of the legislation is unconstitutional in that you cannot prove criminal intent of someone who commits a sexual assault. And Ms. Germanos Manuel argues that a lot of the time when someone is sexually assaulted, she's only talking about women here, they freeze up in 70% of the cases. We're going to need the paperwork on that. You always have to check feminist stats. So now she's not speaking here, if you listen carefully to the video and to what they're saying, she's not speaking here just about out and out attacks on a woman who might be walking to a taxi rank or in a parking lot or something like that and gets attacked by a stranger in a violent criminal act. What they're positing here is that people who are engaging in some sort of intimacy or sexual activity.
So let's then talk about that section regarding consent. If that has now been declared unconstitutional, do we have any knowledge right now as to what the text might read or what the recommended text should be?
We do, because we recommended the text that is now being read in. So what we wanted to do, and obviously in addition to this declaration of unconstitutionality, you can't just have this lacuna, this gap in the law. We asked the court to place a positive obligation on accused persons going forward to take steps in order to ascertain whether or not consent is given. So for the first time in our legal history, in terms of sexual offenses, an accused person can no longer rely on an assumption of consent being given. They now have a legal duty, an obligation that has now been placed by the court to take what the court calls, and what we ask that it include, objectively reasonable steps to ascertain consent. And yeah, that is a game changer.
Have to take positive steps. They cannot assume consent. They have to somehow find what Ms. Germano's manual calls objectively reasonable steps. They have to take objectively reasonable steps to ascertain consent. So now, while two people are getting intimate and romantic, in some way, these people have to engage in what she calls objective reasonable steps to ascertain consent. And by saying that, she means the man has to get that actually. How do you apply it for a woman if a man doesn't want to do that? And here's the thing. This is a very dangerous piece of wording here in this law, because how do you do that? And how does the person that you're engaging in intimacy with actually show you that? And once they've shown you that, what's to say they don't take it back afterwards and say that it wasn't an objective and reasonable step that they were giving you, short of signing a contract with the person you're about to engage in intimacy with? I would say you're playing with your life and with your freedom if you don't get a signed contract, verbal, recorded affirmation with video and biometric proof. Because what does that even begin to mean? What on earth is objective, reasonable steps to ascertain consent, especially when you're dealing with a woman? Because we know GBV means only the assault of women. They don't care about the little boys. They don't care about the men that are being abused in prisons and otherwise, and they don't care about the murdered men and murdered little boys. We're talking here about women. This is their approach, and this is why it will never work, because it's dim-witted, and they've got the blinders on, and it's a feminist agenda. It is not for the betterment of the country.
Wow. We know, Leanne, that the Department of Justice opposed this. Do you anticipate that they will likely appeal? And if they do, is it your foresight that this might well land up at the Constitutional Court?
So I think I'm going to answer your questions in two parts. The first is I did not anticipate that the Minister of Justice would have opposed this application to begin with. So I don't know what to anticipate with regards to appealing this judgment. My hope is that they will not. And with regards to the Constitutional Court, the law requires that any declaration of invalidity, constitutional invalidity, has to be confirmed by the Constitutional Court. So it can never stop at the High Court. We are now in the process of submitting an application to the Constitutional Court to confirm this order by the High Court. And we're hoping that the Minister of Justice will just go along and abide by the court's ruling. And if it wants to participate in the proceedings, perhaps it would do so in terms of suggesting an alternative remedy if it has one in mind. But I genuinely hope they don't oppose this or appeal this judgment.
Yeah. In closing, just out of interest, based on exactly your opening of this final question that you've just responded to, you're saying that you did not anticipate that the Minister of Justice would even oppose this matter. So just out of curiosity then, what were their arguments in court, if you're able to just sum that up for us?
So I think the crux of their argument, they had a few, but the crux of their argument was that what we were asking for, this positive obligation and this changing of the test from a subjective test to an objective test, it would reverse the onus of proof from the state having to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the accused person is guilty to the accused person having to prove their innocence. And at the hearing and in the judgment, the judge dismissed that argument out of hand. He just did not find that to be a plausible argument at all, because that is not what happens. That is not what this remedy does or what this order will do. It does not reverse the onus.
So this is what the ladies at the Embrace Project have proposed. This is a very dangerous piece of wording, that what you have with that wording is that the person who's being accused now has to prove their innocence, which is actually against South African law and any reasonable law in any reasonable country. The person who is accused is assumed innocent until proven guilty. What this wording does is that that person who's being accused now is presumed guilty and has to prove their innocence. Their innocence against the words of another person who's accusing them, who can change their mind, who can reframe the events, and who can change the meaning of certain things. A reminder that you can get a digital comic book emailed to you every single month when you become a member on our Buy Me a Coffee page. The obvious solution to what is called gender-based violence is obviously changing how our societies form around single mothers. That's the first thing. We need harsh sentences for those sort of crimes, and we need to deal with crime and society in general, because this is a malady of a maladjusted people who are living in a dysfunctional society. It is not just about marching. You will never fix it like that. You need to deal with the people who are committing it and stop spraying around your accusations at every man with a pulse. And on top of that, you need to actually fix society countrywide and broadly. Where does that leave us? Does it leave us with no hope or clinging on to the ideas of feminists? This is a society-wide problem that has no easy answers. You won't just fling some insults at men and fix it. You won't just fling some insults at young boys and fix it, because that's not the problem. The problem is systemic within the society and within the culture, and you have to fix the culture by moving away from single mothers, by dealing with crime broadly in every way, because this is part of that problem. And if you don't have a well-ordered, respectable society, things like this do happen, and people like this think they can get away with it. And once you catch people like this, there should be harsh sentences out of clear trials, not with vague words and wording like this. This problem is best fixed in a society-wide way, not just with petty insults and little activation projects and marches. In conclusion, you will not fix so-called GBV by accusing all men and boys of being potential rapists. You actually have to deal with a society-wide problem of why your society is dysfunctional. And then you have to take out the centering of women in all aspects of things and get back to the point that men are the natural leaders of life. And once that happens, we'll be moving in the right direction to deal with this. And wording like Ms. Germanus Manuel and her friends have introduced is not only dangerous, I think it will only make things worse. Because by that standard, everyone is a potential rapist, except the women. And on top of that, how then do we decide a true court case of who was assaulted and who wasn't? Because everything can be murky based on those words. It is a very bad idea. This is a misguided project by misguided women who will not in the end have anything good to contribute to the scourge that is besetting our women in South Africa. As saying, the heart has its reasons, of which reason knows nothing. Blaise Pascal. I recommend we move away from the way we've been trying to deal with gender-based violence in South Africa by accusing men and calling them trash and viewing every little boy as a potential rapist, as a potential future sexual assaulter. This is disgusting, demeaning, dismissive, and wrong-headed. The case is closed, my friend. So-called gender-based violence is not a quick fix. It calls for harsh sentences for perpetrators, for clear wording in the law so that everyone who is charged is actually guilty as far as we can actually prove. And then you have to decenter your women. Remember that men are the natural leaders of life. You have to get rid of the social grant single mother system in South Africa and then deal with your society to fix the family, to fix employment, so that you have a functional society, not a dysfunctional one, where people can get away with horrendous crimes like this. The approach that feminists, women, media, crafty politicians, opportunistic politicians, and other cheap people, the approach that they are taking is not going to fix this and hasn't fixed it and will never be able to fix. Because you think someone who does that cares about what this group of domkops has to say? Please.